What's going on, everyone? Today, I want to talk about my top 10 characters in the Breaking Bad universe. So, this encompasses both shows of, the original show Breaking Bad and its prequel, Better Call Saul. And technically, it would also include the movie that comes after Breaking Bad, El Camino, though this probably doesn't have that much of an effect on this list. In making this list, I just tried to consider everything, including what I believe to be the quality of the character and my personal liking for the character. So it's kind of a combination of how good I think the character is and how much I liked the character. So, with that being said, I start out at number 10 with a character that I don't really like at all, actually. At least her personality, and it's Skylar White. Skylar cracks this top 10 because she's an undeniably crucial character to the show of Breaking Bad. Not to mention the fact that in the later seasons of the show, she does kind of support Walt and stay by his side, even though early on she was very off put by the fact that, he produced meth. I think a lot of wives would get mad at their husband for that. But altogether, her personality wasn't the most likable. She treated him and just a lot of situations with just a lack of care and a lack of compassion, I feel. So I don't feel like she was the best person, but she was put in adverse situations. I mean, most wives don't have to deal with their husbands, being meth cooks. So, I got to give her a little bit of forgiveness there. And like I said, she kind of redeemed herself from being just an unlikable character early on in the show. As later in the show, she helped out Walt and, kind of got into a little bit of the shady business with him because I feel like she thought that was the best and safest route at that point rather than, trying to, just be completely against him while also hiding what he's doing at the same time. At number 9, I have Lalo Salamanca. And as I said in the video I just posted about my overall thoughts on Better Call Saul after finishing, Lalo Salamanca completely upped the intensity of Better Call Saul. And, he only enters at the end of season 4. So he dies in mid season 6. So he's really only in the show for about a season and a half, a little more. But he certainly makes the period that he's in the show the most intense. And he's basically a psychopath that will go to any extent to protect his family name and his family's business. That's what's most important to him. And he does a lot of crazy things. He kills Howard Hamlin basically at the climax of the show in a very unpredictable manner. And that's actually a word I would use to describe him overall. He's super unpredictable. And also, he proves at many points he's really hard to catch. Gus sends out a whole crew to take him out when he goes back home to Mexico. He even has Nacho working on the inside for him. But even that wasn't enough to take down Lalo. Lalo, managed to kill, I think, all 5 of the special agents that were there to take him out. And that's with him, being completely blindsided by the attack. So he was a great action character for the show, a character that really took things to the next level, being that Hector Salamanca no longer could. And, he just had that same ruthless energy that he was going to keep his power and his family's power no matter what. At number 8, I have Nacho Varga. And Nacho is the first of these characters that I really loved. I think in a lot of ways he can be compared to Jesse Pinkman from Breaking Bad because, he's the character that, yes, he's wrapped up in all this, but at many points he makes it clear that he doesn't want to do it anymore. And unfortunately, just given the situation he's in, the connections he has, the people that have power over him, he keeps getting drawn back in, and he basically has no choice in the matter. Nacho starts off the first couple seasons not receiving too much screen time and us not really getting to get too personal with him. But as the show moves forward, they start tying in the storyline with his dad and how his dad, is pretty upset that Nacho continues to choose this lifestyle. And even though I do think he chose it to begin with, I think what his dad doesn't understand is he truly does want to get out of this, but he needs to make sure he does it in a smart way so that him and his father remain unscathed in the process. And that's something that definitely weighs on Nacho's mind, the well-being of his father. Spoiler alert, Nacho does die as well. And even before he dies, the one insurance he wanted from Gus is that, nobody would touch his father and his father would get to live out the rest of his life in peace. So Nacho really cared about his family as well, but in a more peaceful manner than someone like Lalo Salamanca. And Nacho is an example of a character that just has a good heart, but is in the wrong situation. And once you get into this game, you really can't get out. A big problem with him as well is that he got caught as, the man in the middle between Gus Fring and Lalo Salamanca in the later seasons of the show. Lalo would be pulling him one way, and Gus would be using him as the middleman to manipulate Lalo in certain situations from the other side. So, this put him in very large predicaments and put him in harm's way more often than not. And there's no better example of that than, the events that led to his death. Being at Lalo's place down in Mexico, he had to go there to begin with just because Lalo controls everything he does, basically. And then Gus has someone call him in the middle of the night and say, this is how you're going to execute the plan. You're going to let these people in. So he kind of had to play both sides. And that was definitely very difficult for him. And ultimately, it's what led to his death. At number 7, I have Hank, a character in a very serious profession as a DEA agent, but he might be the most unserious character, meaning, in every situation, he's kind of cracking a rather immature joke, with a smile on his face and a smirk. And he was really a fun-loving character in the end. He's kind of what you would think of as like, that one uncle that's always making jokes at the cookout. That's really like the personality he had. And, it's a shame how his character arc ends in the show. And just thinking back, Hank has so many impactful moments in Breaking Bad. He has the shootout with the Salamanca brothers in the parking lot of a grocery store, I believe. He discovers that Walter White is Heisenberg in an unlikely way in Walter's bathroom by reading a book that he had on the side of the toilet. And he captures Walt in the desert, reads him his rights, and, basically places him under arrest only to, meet his demise a few minutes later. So Hank was involved with a lot of the most high stake moments in Breaking Bad. And really, I think a big piece of Hank's character, at least something that I was waiting for the whole show, was when would Hank find out that Walt is Heisenberg? To me, that was going to be the big revelation. I was thinking that from, there were moments in season 2 where I thought he was going to find out. And then, he would just narrowly miss a detail that Walter left hanging, or he would narrowly miss Walter coming from a certain spot. That is what I was waiting for the whole show, though. I figured that is how, they had to advance that part of the storyline. And sure enough, he does figure it out in season 5. And then, it just becomes, the matter of proving it and of getting him in cuffs. And Hank does achieve that. He shows his skills in many scenarios as a very good DEA agent. But unfortunately, Walt kind of screwed him in the end again. And, you definitely feel bad about how Hank's life ends in the show. In number 6, I have Kim Wexler, and she is only in Better Call Saul, which is kind of why I don't have her higher. Everybody else that's higher was either in both extensively or is, just one of the couple biggest characters in the whole Breaking Bad universe. But Kim is certainly crucial to Better Call Saul and to Saul Goodman / Jimmy McGill's character. And I loved her unconditional love and loyalty for Jimmy, even when everyone doubted him, when everyone was against him, when everyone basically, thought he was a horrible person and, just thought he was a no good crook, even though in many ways he was pretty crooked. She would always stand up for him. She would always stay loyal to him and stay by his side. And I especially respected it early on in the show because not only would she defend him from, a legal point of view, she would defend, his character and his personality and say that he does have good intentions. He just, makes some decisions sometimes that aren't well calculated. And, there's many scenarios where she speaks truth. She speaks the truth to Chuck, Jimmy's brother, I believe, when she says that, Jimmy's whole life he's been trying to get your approval and get acceptance from you. Now, even though in the situation, was she kind of lying a little bit? Because Jimmy did actually mess with the evidence of Chuck's documents, yes. But what she's saying at the same time is true. Chuck has always treated him poorly and has always treated him like he's a lot less than him. So, Kim tried to spin things in a way that would benefit Jimmy at all times. And there's countless examples I could bring up of this, but I thought that was the one that stuck out to me the most. And even though they have much different personalities and way of going about things, especially in their professional lives, I think Kim really resonates with Jimmy's life, how he grew up and his relationship with his brother, or lack thereof, I guess you could say. And I definitely found her fall from being a reputable, clean as a whistle lawyer with a lot of integrity to kind of stooping down to, Jimmy's level of ripping people off later in the show. I found it very interesting and, one that seemed very out of character for her. But it seems to prove that like a lot of people can kind of get off at this type of thrill. And, we saw it with Walter White, we saw it with Saul Goodman, and then Kim Wexler kind of grew into it as well. Kind of as someone who gets into the game and then, thinks they're good at it and thinks it's fun. I'd say her best moment is when she stands up to Lalo Salamanca in their apartment when he comes and kind of scolds Jimmy about his story from the desert and whether he was lying about it or not. She basically says, you have no place to be doing this, and Jimmy would never lie about it, even though Jimmy was lying. And like I said, even if he was right or wrong, she always stood up for him, and that I always respected because I feel like that's what you should do for someone you love. Before I continue the list, hit the like and subscribe button if you like this content, and if you want to see more about Breaking Bad, Better Call Saul, and a lot of other shows and movies in the near future. At number 5, I have Mike Ehrmantraut, a character who is heavily involved in both Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul. Mike is a pragmatic, no-nonsense older man that is really doing everything he's doing related to the drug business to try to provide for his daughter-in-law and granddaughter, as his son died tragically as a Philadelphia police officer. It definitely seems like his motives are among the most well-intentioned in the entire show. It really doesn't seem like he has a vendetta with anyone or has, a lot of vengeance in his heart. Maybe with the cops that did his son wrong in Philadelphia, you could certainly say in that scenario. But speaking strictly, getting into the business with Gus Fring, he is definitely doing this just to provide for his family, nothing else. And that's something I certainly think you can say is respectable about him compared to a lot of these other characters, because a lot of them are doing it for, greed, power, revenge. And I do think Mike, like I said, is more well intentioned than probably the rest of these characters in this business. Mike's storyline comes to a close when he dies at the end of Breaking Bad. And this really just showed the extent that Walter White would go to and, kind of how out of control he had gotten, that he would kill someone like Mike that was really on his side throughout everything and was just someone who was trying to do the right thing in the situation and take the supplies where he needed to take them. And Walter, refused for him to do that and killed him in broad daylight. Now, this top 4 is what I think should be everybody's top 4, but I will say for my top of the list, I did kind of take my personal favorites a little more into consideration, just because I think these characters are all so well done that I think at the end of the day, the thing that's going to differentiate them for me is how much I like their personality and how much I liked the big stakes moments they were involved in. So at number 4, I have Saul Goodman, and it is hard to leave him out of the top 2 or 3. But that being said, he is a phenomenal character, and Bob Odenkirk has one of the most impressive performances I've seen acting out Jimmy McGill and Saul Goodman. And, seeing his rise from, a mailroom worker at a law firm to being a lawyer to, becoming more corrupt and becoming uh, a person that criminals really rely on to, give them some slippery service and get them out of tough situations, to where he ends up in Breaking Bad, being a part of one of the biggest drug enterprises with one of the biggest like drug lords, I guess you could say, in Heisenberg, which is Walter. Just seeing, how far he comes from his beginnings to his end is certainly amazing to follow. And Saul undeniably has a captivating aura, one that I think definitely makes it hard for the audience to dislike him, but also for people in the show to say no to him. He's he's that character that can really get himself out of any situation. People reference a scene from Breaking Bad where he gets Walter and Jesse from pointing guns to his head to putting money in his pocket within a matter of minutes. And that's really kind of the theme for him throughout Better Call Saul and Breaking Bad. He always figures out a way to convince people, usually in scenes like that where, somebody has a gun to your head or, your life's in danger, they just tell you to shut up and stop talking. But Saul has a way with words and always figures out a way to talk himself out of any situation. This skill set, along with honestly questionable morals at times, is what leads Saul to be, so corrupt and to pulling all of the schemes that he pulls in Better Call Saul. And I wish I could be more specific, but if you've seen Better Call Saul, you know just how many shenanigans he gets himself into, and then, right in turn, gets himself right back out of them. The thing about Saul is I think he truly starts the show well intentioned, and I think that's, a way he's similar to Walter White. I do think, they start doing things for the right reasons. And I think in many scenarios, he did want to have a better relationship with his brother. He did actually love Kim, but he does still take advantage of them in many scenarios and manipulates them, just like he does with other situations in his legal life. And it's something that he can't really change about himself. And I think more so than any other character in these shows, he stays the same throughout. He really is that same person. You can accuse him of a lot of things, but one thing is, he never changes. He stays true to himself, even though, he doesn't have the best moral compass or, the best knowledge of when to act certain ways. And I certainly found the ending to his character to be pretty commendable. I liked how they wrapped up Better Call Saul and how, he wanted Kim to be at the court to hear his admissions, to hear, him let off all the guilt he has from Howard Hamlin's death, from his brother's death and their relationship, from, other schemes he pulled throughout his lifetime, and especially how he helped Walter White and he enabled him to build himself up as this drug king of the Southeast. And I thought it was very moving. I thought the way they ended the show, there was a lot of imagery and a lot of great symbols in there that kind of connected and juxtaposed the characters of Kim Wexler and Saul Goodman, and I just loved his story start to finish. At number 3, I have Gus Fring. Gus is the main antagonist in Breaking Bad, and then we get his prequel story in Better Call Saul, and I would argue he's not the main antagonist in this show, actually. I think we're given a bit more perspective as to why he makes certain moves that he does in Breaking Bad and, how he got to the position of being the main antagonist. But I don't think he's completely unjustified in everything that he does now that we see what goes down in Better Call Saul and what his motivating factors were. A lot of it was wanting to get revenge on the Salamancas and specifically some things that Hector Salamanca did to him. Now, don't get me wrong, Gus is still a pretty ruthless villain in Breaking Bad. I'm not saying that I think he's a good person necessarily, but I do think we're shown a little bit of a softer side of him in Better Call Saul, and one that can make me appreciate a little more what he does and what he's been through in his life, and maybe why he is so stern and why he makes the decisions he does with his business. And I really feel like he's just different than any other villain I've ever seen. He doesn't really let his emotions get out of control. He's very cunning and calculated and smooth and swift in his decision making. And, his decisions have a lot of impact given the scale of his business and, the people involved with it and how many lives are at stake. And yet through it all, he stays pretty emotionless. Gus is also involved in two of the most thrilling scenes in the show: the scene where he kills Lalo Salamanca in Better Call Saul, and the scene where he is manipulated and killed by Walter White when Walt gets the upper hand in, their kind of back and forth battle. And it's one of the most like iconic standstill scenes from the show when, he's buttoning himself up with half of his body burnt off. It's quite the image. And Gus, like I said, just his personality, his motives, everything about him makes him one of the most interesting villains I've ever followed in a show or movie. If I haven't already ruffled feathers with my ordering recently so far, I think I will here. But at number 2, I have Walter White. Now, Walter is such a complex character that I'm not going to dare to try to cover his whole story arc in this little video here. But, to summarize, Walt has one of the craziest character arcs in television history. He starts as a high school chemistry teacher, a pretty mild-mannered one at that, and he ends up as a drug king, a drug lord, whatever you want to call it, one of the biggest distributors and producers of methamphetamine in the southeastern United States, and he's really known nationally once his story is revealed to everyone. Some of the quarrels he has with his wife, with Jesse, with Hank, are some of the most moving moments throughout the entirety of either of these shows. Specifically, his relationship with Jesse, I think, is something that carries the show. And, in a weird way, he cares about him, but he also drags him around and manipulates him like a rag doll. And it's hard to see, it's hard to watch for Jesse. And it's also hard to watch for Walt because, you think at his core, is this really who he is? But, he's a very complex character, one that's hard to figure out even after watching the entirety of the show. Um, and it's hard to, break it down in a much more detailed way because, he has a lot of conflicting actions and emotions throughout the entirety of the show. There's certain points where you feel like he is good intentioned, and then there's moments where you feel like he couldn't be any more evil. There's moments where, you feel like, hey, he actually might be doing the right thing here. This might be his only choice. And then a detail is revealed later that he did have a choice. So it's a very convoluted character, one that, makes him the most interesting or one of the most interesting in television history. A couple of the most classic Walter White moments include his admission to Skyler at the end of the show about how he enjoyed what he did and he actually thought he was really good at it, and that's why he wanted to keep going. He finally let up the lie of the fact that, he was doing this for his family all these years, even though I think that's what he started out with, and those were his initial intentions. Eventually it got to the point where he liked the money, he liked the power, and he liked the thrill of, bossing people around and of being powerful and of being the best at something. Another great moment is when he screams, "Where is the money?" to Skyler. Of course, when he manipulates and kills Gus Fring, that's an amazing moment. And then we figure out that he was actually the one to poison Brock. That was a crazy revelation as well. And then it goes without saying that him and Jesse had countless amazing moments, and they had a very confusing and up and down relationship throughout the show. One that I think, did possess a lot of love, but, also was pretty unhealthy for both sides. And, my two favorite characters in this universe, I wish, they could have left off on a better foot in many situations. But ultimately, I think Walt does show his care for him, saving him at the end of the show, even though Jesse can probably never forgive him for all the things he did. And that leads me to my number one character, which is Jesse Pinkman. To me, I put him at one because I think he's just as well written, or at least almost as well written as the characters I just provided. And he's also the most lovable, the character that I rooted for in every situation. And I also got a lot of time with him. Not only do I get him throughout all of Breaking Bad, but I get him in the movie that follows, El Camino, where we can get some closure with him. And then we also get a few scenes that he's in Better Call Saul near the very end of the show in some special appearances. So we have a lot of time with Jesse Pinkman. And I really think of any character in either of these shows, I think he had the best heart. He was the most well-intentioned, and it's just tragic, a lot of the things that happened to him, the way that Walt treated him in many scenarios, and just his whole life story in general was pretty tragic. I mean, he grew up to be someone his parents really weren't proud of. So, he didn't really have a relationship with them or with his little brother. He had multiple girlfriends throughout the show that he really fell for that died in about the most tragic ways you can imagine. One to an overdose and one being killed, by the people he was mixed up with. They killed her, excuse me, right in front of his eyes. But even through all the tumultuous things he had to go through in his life, Jesse was always a fighter, always someone with a lot of courage in situations where you wouldn't expect him to have so much. And like I said, he had the biggest heart. He cared about people, and didn't really want to do these horrible things that he was forced to do because of the environment in which he found himself. And I found it to be very tragic. And I found him to be an extremely well written character, one that I could resonate with more probably than any other character in the entire franchise. So these are my top 10 characters from the Breaking Bad universe, encompassing Breaking Bad, Better Call Saul, and El Camino. Even though this video is pretty long, I still feel like I couldn't go into great detail on a lot of these characters just because they're much too complex to explain in 1 to 3 minutes each. So, especially the people near the top of the list. But still, I hope you enjoyed my top 10, and let me know what your top 10 characters are in the comments. So I hope you enjoyed today's video. Now that I'm finished with Better Call Saul, you can expect more content from that in Breaking Bad moving forward. So if you're interested, stay tuned for that. And until next time, I'll see you later.